I was quite pleased with one I wrote recently, wrote a researcher wrote about the 1930 Ards TT race. And if I knew the answer to that question, perhaps I wouldn't be sitting in Belfast. Perhaps I'd be, I don't know, sitting in Milton Keynes somewhere with a good job. In fact, like everything in life, it comes down to people. And
Mm-hmm.
stories are about people, and motor racing is about people. So everyone's interesting. And even if someone is, uh, for want of a better phrase, a pain in the arse, it's always worth meeting them and shaking their hand and hearing what they've got to say. Perhaps, perhaps racing can become racing for its own sake. I think I've developed a real love of it. I think because it was necessary to stick with it. Stick with it wasn't easy all the way.
Hello, and welcome back to another dashing episode of Georgie Stripping the Dipping. And this is your unusual, out of the blue moon host, Georgie herself. Unfortunately, today, Denzel and F1 Black is not available, so here I am with you. So, today we have a founder, a creator, writer, and a consultant all together as one person. So, please let me warmly welcome Colin Johnston. How are you, Colin?
Hey, yes, I'm great. I'm great, Georgie. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. So I'm super excited to have you over for the show. So my first question, I'm gonna straight away dig down through
Oh,
the
straight at
questions
it.
right away.
Straight at
So,
it.
where did your passion for motorsport originate? Describe your earliest motorsport memories for us, please.
Oh well, I guess like so many, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. So for so
Mhm.
many of us, it started on TV. I guess my first memory probably is I have a vague recollection of seeing the start of the 1976 British Grand Prix on TV. And some of your listeners may remember that one. There was a crash at the start, and James Hunt's McLaren going up in the air in the first corner of Brands Hatch. I imagine I saw that as a child, but that was long ago. It was a very early memory. Um, but more seriously, I got into it 1982. I have an uncle who was interested in motorsport, and he sort of got me onto Formula One, and I've been watching Formula One since San Marino in 1982. And again, another great race, another legendary race that featured very recently in the Gilles Villeneuve and Didier Pironi a documentary that was on Sky F1 just a few weeks ago. So yep, F1 then, and also in Northern Ireland here, a lot of rallying always has been. And I was taken along to the Circuit of Ireland rally at Easter and things like that there, following the rallying. And yeah, that was all an early influence.
But I mean, you have great memories of the whole Grand Prix, so I'm super excited to dig deep more. So you run a lovely website called racingdaydreams.com.
Oh, that's very
Where
nice of you
did
to
the
say that.
inspiration to where did the inspiration to start the website begin? What type of content is posted there? So this is going to be a very long question.
Very
And
long question.
what's your favorite article or content piece on there?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Well, very long question, very long answer, perhaps. Let's see. Um, the website sort of came, it partially came off the back of me using social media quite a
Mm-hmm.
lot and getting involved there and chatting with folks and um, uh, doing a certain amount of fact checking is the wrong word, but telling a certain amount of stories or and correcting stories and correcting bits and pieces of history and finding that I was repeating myself now and again, and really thinking that really I should probably write these things down once somewhere where I can link to them rather than having to explain the same things over and over. Combined with that, then it was a bit of a lockdown project as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'd I had changed job and I needed something creative to do. It was kind of that lockdown period, so I sort of dipped my toe in the water doing a wee bit of writing around motorsport and motorsport history. And I was very lucky. Very quickly, a few folks in the industry encouraged me and said, this is okay. Stick at it. So I've built it up from there, and it's really a way of me doing some storytelling about motor racing and motor racing history, and I can do it on my own terms. I can post once a week. I can post once every 6 months. I'm not beholden to anybody. So there's a collection of stories and features there, short pieces perhaps about me visiting various motor racing sites and my thoughts, um, historical pieces, a couple of myth busting pieces. For example, the famous story of the Mercedes Grand Prix car having its white paint stripped the night before the race in 1934.
Ooh.
I think we finally put that one to bed. That it's a lovely story, but it's a myth. So things like that.
Is it though? Is it though? Is it a myth though?
Is it what? Sorry, is it a myth?
Is it a myth though? You sure
It's
that's a myth?
it is a myth, and it is, yes. The timeline does not work out. There could not, in my opinion, there could not have been a white Mercedes W25 at the Avis Rennen, and then a prepared, repaired, stripped silver one at the Nurburgring. It couldn't have happened. And I think if you, it's a lovely story. It is a lovely story,
Mhm.
and it was. I think the basis of it comes from Alfred Neubauer's, the Mercedes manager, his biography. But if you dig down, I think you'll find that the like of the Mercedes Museum will say it's a lovely story. I don't think anybody's really standing up now and saying it's gospel truth that that overnight all this paint was stripped to save 1 kilogram when it wasn't necessary. So, but lovely story, and motorsport's full of lovely stories, and they're
Yeah.
great. And whether they're overblown or tall tales, sometimes it's a lovely way to engage people with the sport, and that's what I found. People engage with stories and storytellers.
What's your favorite article or the content piece on there on the website?
Oh, choose my favorite. Choose my favorite. I was quite pleased with one I wrote recently. Wrote a research and wrote about the 1930 Ards TT race in Belfast
Mm-hmm.
here. It involved a wee bit of research as well because the Mercedes team were excluded from that race.
Mm-hmm.
The cars didn't pass scrutineering. It was quite fun to look into that and tell the story of that. Again, in a slightly storytelling style, but it's what I like to do. I like it to be factually correct, but an engaging story. Um,
Yeah.
I I like the old fashioned motor racing books, Tim Burton's Full Throttle and things like that. Some of the old things where they were telling the right story, but it was a ripping yarn and it was great fun, and I took you on a great ride.
So when you write down an article or a content piece, what sort of topic or how do you choose a topic? Oh, this is what I'm going to write, or also, oh, what triggers that inspiration to write something?
It can be anything really.
Mm-hmm.
It can be something where perhaps somebody has said something on social media and has triggered something, triggered a thought. Um, be that sort of me wanting to say, "Oh yes, that's a very good point," and expand on it, or do the opposite
Mm-hmm.
and go, "Eek, maybe not quite right." Um, but the inspiration comes from lots of different places, and I'm very lucky because I'm not writing for somebody else at this time. So
Yeah.
I've no deadlines, and I've no editor hanging over me, or and nobody waiting for copy. So yes, it can be a race or an event that's really spoken to me, and I want to look into it further.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can be even physically visiting locations. Last summer, I've been looking at a lot at the 1903 motor racing season recently. Obviously, it's 120 years the anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Last summer, I went down to Southern Ireland and visited the site of the Gordon Bennett Trophy race down there. And again, just from walking the roads and tracing the circuit, squaring off the old photographs to the locations today, and just just being still and quiet enough and just thinking about things, you can quite often get you can quite often find something to say. And again, following on from that, I'm just back from a holiday in Nice in the south of France, and again, I took the opportunity while I was there to look at the motor racing that happened there 120 years and 1 week ago.
Oh, wow, that is amazing. So you have a lot of knowledge regarding the Grand Prix. So let me ask you this question. This is actually regarding the racing legends. There are
Okay.
many racing legends that have unfortunately gone before their time, like Ayrton Senna, Colin
Mhm.
McRae, Jules Villeneuve, and Jochen Rindt. But who would say is the most underrated driver that died at before they achieved success?
There were so many, of course, and particularly going back over the years, there were so many, and I suppose everybody reaches for it's a rather obvious name, Stefan Belloff,
Mm-hmm.
who was so outstanding in the sports cars, and we never got to see his full potential in Formula One. Um, but perhaps, let me see, given I'm sort of history guy, let's go maybe a slightly different route, maybe somebody that your listeners haven't heard of. And again, a local connection to me in Northern Ireland here
Mm-hmm.
is there was a racing driver called Hugh Hamilton in the 1930s,
Wow.
and he was he was born in Omagh in Northern Ireland, and he grew up in England, and he was a friend of Richard Seaman, who was the great British racing driver of the mid 1930s and drove for the Mercedes-Benz Grand Prix team.
Mm-hmm.
And Hugh Hamilton was a great talent, and like many in that era, he came up through the ranks very quickly. But he had some enormous results, particularly in the small MG racing cars. At 1933, at the Eiffel Rennen, he had a class win in a supercharged AMG, and he won by 24 minutes his class around the Nurburgring. An outstanding driver, really very talented. And in 33 as well at the Ards TT in Belfast. He only just was beaten by Tazio Nuvolari over the course of the Ards TT. So he was a tremendous racing driver. And again, like our topic, sadly he died in 1934 at Bremgarten at the Swiss Grand Prix. Um, but a great lost talent, and like so many, perhaps one that's slightly forgotten by those who don't take a specific interest. But he was a great talent, and he could have done great things. He did great things.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many people that we have never heard of
Mm-hmm.
as the newcomers in the whole Grand Prix enthusiastic. But the thing is, like, there are so many talent that should be appreciated as well, just like the people that you mentioned as well. So
Oh yes,
there's
yes.
that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Since you mentioned Mercedes several times, I'm going to ask you these questions as well.
Yep.
Mercedes have a rich history in motorsport, DTM, F1, and FIA GT1. Other than Lewis Hamilton, who's the greatest driver to race for the German outfit in any other motorsport series?
The greatest Mercedes. The thing about Mercedes Benz, and um, I'm a fan of Mercedes Benz. I'm a fan of
Oh, that
Mercedes Benz.
that that makes two of us then.
Well, I'm a fan of them today. Very much a fan of them today because I do like the way they go motor racing today.
Yeah.
Um, but I think anyone who looks in depth at the history of motor racing comes to have this huge respect for Mercedes Benz and Mercedes, um, simply because there's 120 odd years of motor racing history there.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the first Mercedes racing car appearing in 1901 and winning almost immediately. So yeah, other than the fantastic Mr. Hamilton, not Hugh Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
um, who was the best? Well, you've got two big names there, two that come to mind straight away, and of course there has to be Sir Sterling Moss.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you've got three big names because then you've got Juan Manuel Fangio. These are the greatest men who ever drove racing cars, perhaps. And a third one then that comes to mind is the great Rudi Caracciola, the great German champion who was so closely aligned with Mercedes Benz for 20 odd years. Caracciola, the great three-time European Grand Prix champion, six-time winner of the German Grand Prix, winner of the Mille Miglia in 1931. In fact, the Mille Miglia 1,000 mile sports car race in Italy, the only two times that the true Mille Miglia was won by a non-Italian was Rudi Caracciola in 1931 and Sterling Moss in 1955, and they were both on Mercedes-Benz cars. So, so it's a hard call. I personally love Caracciola.
Yeah. I
Um,
love Sterling Moss a lot. I mean,
yes, of
for me, I
course.
appreciate that talent because nowadays the Formula One cars are more technologically driven than
Mhm.
mechanically driven. But those days, it was all about the mechanical aspects. And driving a car those days means the driver is supposed to be like, sorry for using this word, but damn good on driving on that. And those days, those years, drivers, no offense for the drivers nowadays, anyways, but those days, those drivers had that nick for that whole fiesta. So,
Oh, certainly those days, a 3 hour Grand Prix around the Nürburgring or Pescara or wherever, or Bremgarten or wherever, it was an incredible thing.
yeah,
It was a remarkable era, and perhaps those mid 1950s were the peak of Grand Prix motor racing. So again,
yeah,
yes, Sir Sterling Moss and Juan Manuel Fangio in that period for Mercedes Benz, outstanding. Another interesting thing, talking about these two men who won the Mille Miglia, Moss and Caracciola, and trying to split them in my mind in terms of who I would put ahead of the other. There was an interesting incident, and I think of it as a passing of the baton between the eras of motor racing and indeed within
yeah.
Mercedes Benz. On the 1953 Mille Miglia, I'm trying to think, am I right? 19, yes, it would have been the 53 Mille Miglia. Um, Caracciola was on the Mercedes Benz, and Sterling Moss passed him on the road with the C-Type Jaguar. And
Wow.
these two men at the two opposite ends of the century of motor racing, who both achieved great things with this great mark, Mercedes Benz. There was that moment where they passed each other on the road, and it was effectively the end of Caracciola's career, and it was Sterling Moss about to shoot for the stars.
Wow. I heard this story. So, see, I actually live in Sri Lanka in Colombo, and
Mm-hmm.
the two guys are in London. So we
Yeah.
connect from through the internet, anyways, through the technology that we hold this whole podcast. And
Uh-huh.
Denzel used to tell me that there's a saying that whenever someone is speeding in London or in UK, the coppers or the police people, the policemen used to say, "Do you think yourself as Sterling Moss when they're speeding up?" So that was
That's
like a
it.
very nice, yeah.
That's it. That's it. In Northern Ireland, sometimes we're slightly different. Certainly, that's like absolute classic of the Sterling Moss one. Sometimes in Northern Ireland, we evoke our famous rally driver Paddy Hopkirk instead. So,
Oh, so you think?
who do you think you are, Paddy Hopkirk? But but certainly, Sir Sterling was the man, a great man, and a great racing driver.
So, diving into the other question that I'm going to ask you now,
Yeah.
is about actually Audi. Audi have been
Huh.
confirmed as an entry for F1 for the 2026. Given the new engine regulations coming in, do
Mhm.
you think that their return to the sport will be a success? And what do Audi have to do differently to ensure they don't fail like Toyota, Peugeot, or BMW?
Oh, see, that's a big question. That is a big question.
Mm.
And if I knew the answer to that question, perhaps I wouldn't be sitting in Belfast. Perhaps I'd be, I don't know, sitting in Milton Keynes somewhere with a good job. Um, First of all, it's lovely to hear you say Audi returning to the sport because, of course, Audi as Auto Union does have
Mhm.
a great deal of history in Grand Prix motor racing in the 1930s. Um, I'm not super qualified to say what Audi needs to do to avoid being another Toyota. I think Toyota prove that you can't just throw money at the problem. And I suspect, and I think when you look at the most successful Grand Prix teams of this last few years and decades, I suspect, like everything in life, it comes down to people. Um, Obviously, Audi are will be working with Sauber, or it's a connection there. As he's
Yeah.
going to become Audi, for want of a better phrase. Um, but I think, like most things in life, if you choose the people you work with wisely and support them and give them the encouragement and give them a working, comfortable, supported working environment, you will get great things from them. So I think like most things in life, it'll be working with the right people and treating them well will work in their favour. More technical than that, I don't know. Certainly, Audi have had tremendous success across, all sorts of formula and all sorts of different motorsport regulations over the decades. Um, Not least when I was a kid and I was, standing in hedges watching Audi Quattros dance past. But certainly with their huge success in WEC, you would have to say that things look good for them. And certainly things look like they should get off to a good start. But what they will achieve is yet to be seen. And as ever, it will come down to the stopwatch. And I just hope they don't set themselves any too overly grand targets and realize that it's a long road. But I'm sure they do. They're very intelligent people, very smart people, I'm sure, behind that operation. And it'll be fascinating to see. It will be really interesting to see a huge manufacturer like that there and another great brand coming into Formula One. And from a heritage point of view, with that history with Auto Union in the 1930s, they have so much history and heritage to play with that they can really have a lot of fun pushing their brand in Formula One when they do arrive in 26.
So diving into another question, this is going to be a very fun question that I'm going to ask you since I've been asking
Okay.
you very stressful questions all the time.
Too serious so far. Let's
Too serious,
read,
too serious.
read the room,
So,
Colin. Lighten up.
so this is actually the taxi dinner avoid question, but in the historical version. So, if you have to choose three drivers, one is to drive you as a taxi driver, and one is to have dinner with you, and another one that you would avoid at any cost. Whom would you pick?
Three drivers throughout history.
Yep, yep.
Taxi driver, taxi driver, taxi driver. Give me Nicky Lauda as the taxi driver.
Ooh,
Give me
what's the reason behind it?
Nicky Lauda, and let's take the long way around. I would I would give nothing more to sit in the back of a taxi and have Nicky Lauda drive me around, and I would pick his brains and listen to his wisdom and just be utterly delighted to meet my childhood hero. So,
Hmm.
taxi driver, Nicky Lauda, take the long way around. Suits me just fine. Dinner, dinner, dinner. I'll pick for dinner Alfred Neubar, who was the Mercedes-Benz Grand Prix manager in the
Hmm.
1930s, 1950s. But prior to that, he was a racing driver as well. He drove for Austro Daimler and then Mercedes in the 1920s. So he does count as a driver, I think, um, because he was such a larger than life character. Um, and I would imagine we'd have tremendous fun. I would imagine we'd open a few bottles and put the world to right. And Herr Neubar could tell his tall tales, and I could tell him that he was talking nonsense, and then we could both have a laugh about it afterwards.
So who would you avoid though?
Who would I avoid? Who would I avoid? Oh, I know who I want to say who I would avoid, but I probably shouldn't say it. Um, um, uh,
Come on, let it out, let it out.
I would cross the street to avoid Christian Horner, I think. But that's probably maybe slightly too brutal. But I suppose it's a brutal question. Is it who would I avoid out of racing drivers? Uh, but I wouldn't really avoid anybody. I don't think people are interesting, and that's what I find in looking at the history and doing all this here. It all comes down to people, and
Hmm.
stories are about people, and motor racing is about people. So everyone's interesting, and even if someone is, uh, for want of a better phrase, a pain in the arse, it's always worth meeting them and shaking their hand and hearing what they've got to say. So maybe I wouldn't avoid Christian after all. Maybe he's an all right bloke.
Maybe we haven't asked the right question from him.
Well, that's it. That's it. uh,
So, if you get a chance to relive a race,
mhm.
you need to pick a classic race to relive. So, what race
Oh,
would you go back to be a part of?
see, this is a tricky one
Mm,
because again, there's so many eras and there's so many people you would want to see.
I know.
And and well, recently I've been spending a lot of time looking at the Ards TT sports car race that happened here in Northern Ireland, the international sports car race that was huge here in the late 1920s and the 1930s. And I was involved in making a TV documentary about that. So perhaps perhaps to 1929 to be like I was a kid watching the rally cars in 1982. Perhaps it would be lovely to be standing at a hedge in 1929 and watching Rudy Caracciola in the great white Mercedes racing through Newton Nards and racing through Cumber. That would be lovely. But then I think, wow, if it's anywhere and you give me the time machine, maybe I should go. Maybe I should go somewhere. Maybe I should go to Pescara, to the Capo Cherbo. Maybe I should lie up in the hills with a fiasco of wine and listen to the racing cars coming round the mountains. But if I was really to see a race, if you were to say to me, here's your time machine, and I can drop you in the middle of a racing team anywhere in history, I think I would have to go to Tripoli in Libya in 1939 for the
1939.
1939 for the Tripoli Grand Prix in 1939, which I was going to tell you about it. How long have you got? Stop me if I ramble. But it was a race for which a formula was introduced at the last minute, relatively speaking, at the last minute. And Mercedes Benz built a special small voiturette Grand Prix style car, especially for this race, in secret, in for the day record time. And they built two of these small Grand Prix type cars. And eventually they finished first and second in the race, but not without a lot of drama. And if you were to drop me anywhere in the world, yeah, put me in the Mercedes pit box in Tripoli in 1939 to see Rudy Caracciola and Lang racing the W165 Voiturettes at Tripoli.
Well, I hope Elon Musk finds a way for us to get a time machine so then we can actually go and check it out.
Would you trust an Elon Musk time machine?
Not really, not really.
You might have to
Not
pay $8
really.
a month to
We
get
might
back.
have to, yeah, we might have to test it like 1,000 times and still we won't be believing that it's going to work out. um, so my next question, where do you see the future of motor racing? Could we see the return of bigger displacement engines in series like F1, but with biosustainable fuels? So many series have come and gone, like the change to DTM, the removal of GTE class from WEC championships, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. Um, it's been great this last few years because motor racing has gone in so many different directions, and I, I think its future is very bright.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the history guy for want of a better phrase, and I really enjoy
Yeah.
Formula One. I also really enjoy Formula E, and I have done right from the get go. I think it's tremendous racing, and like the technology and I like the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
As a series, perhaps they're not always, uh, perhaps they don't always do things as well as they should. I think perhaps I feel sometimes they could be better organized, better promoted, whatever. But I think Formula
Mm-hmm.
E is tremendous. So I'm not. While I love all the old things, I'm not a dyed in the wool, you know, straight down the line petrol head. I enjoy racing
Yeah.
of all sorts. But I think there's I think as personal mobility, which was probably what we'll look towards rather than saying I own a car in the
Mm-hmm.
future, as that moves away perhaps from the ownership model that we have been used to as car owners, perhaps motor racing will move slightly away from being so tied closely to justifying itself by saying it has to have a road relevance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, perhaps perhaps racing can become racing for its own sake. Um, we, I don't know, maybe it's a clunky analogy, but 125 years later, we still have horse racing and we don't go to the shops on a horse anymore. So there's still I can envision the internal combustion engine in some sort of sustainable fuel continuing to
Yeah.
power racing cars well into the future. And more importantly, I think for our heritage, the remarkable heritage of motor racing over this last 120 odd years, sustainable fuels will hopefully allow thousands of remarkable machines to continue to be raced and demonstrated for decades to come. But it's very hard to know. I could see Formula One going back to internal combustion engine alone, but it depends what the manufacturers want to do. It, it,
Yeah,
it always comes down to who's going to pay for it.
yeah.
And if
It,
we're
it all
if
comes down for the money that they're going to spend.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. And it's the bucks that make motor racing happen at certainly at an international level. So if we were talking about Audi, so if the Audis and the Mercedes Benz and other manufacturers can't see road relevance, will they still be interested in motor racing for a halo effect over whatever sort of product they're putting out, electric or whatever. So it's very hard to tell, but I can see pure motor racing in many different forms, be it electric or be it sustainably fueled internal combustion engines. I think we've got a strong future, and I think as long as there's two things with wheels on them and there's two men, I think they'll be racing each other.
But if I change this question and ask you like a question
Mm-hmm.
like this, so
Yeah.
this is all about the technology, but do you
Mm-hmm.
see a difference? I mean, drastically a difference between those eras and nowadays in Formula One? Do you see a lack of value, or or if you do you see like the nourishment that it used to have has gone down, or do you see that it has increased?
It's very tricky to answer that because I can end up sounding like an old man shouting at the clouds. Um, and I'm 50 years old now, and Formula One says I'm not their demographic anymore.
Yeah.
Even though I've followed it for 40 years, but they say I'm not my demographic. I don't think they're right about that because one look at the advertisers on Sky F1,
Yeah.
they're trying to sell me pensions and life insurance and all sorts of things. So I don't quite believe that the demographic is perhaps as young as what they say. So I can say that it feels I could say that it feels more shallow. I could say that it feels more contrived in some ways.
Hmm.
But then people just say shut up old man. So maybe it's moved on, and it's not what it was when I started enjoying it in the 1980s. But then nothing's the same as what it was in the 1980s. And
Yeah.
the beauty of our sport is that I can watch the Australian Grand Prix last weekend and shout at the TV at the absolute nonsense that is going on. But
Yeah.
thanks to modern technology, I can you know kick the TV, turn the computer on, and watch a race from 40 years ago on YouTube. So
Yeah.
so we
Just
have
about
our
that
options.
time.
Yes, so I'm yes, I can end up just sounding like yes, like an old buffoon, but really, Drive to Survive has brought a lot of people into the sport, which is fantastic. Anything that gets people watching motor racing for the first time is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But I can't watch it.
Yeah.
The new series comes out and I watch the first two episodes and then I think life's too short. Um, so so that's another topic. I think motorsport documentaries. I think the motorsport documentaries that I grew up with were fantastic, and it had depth and it had real information and have stood the test of time and stood renewed viewing. And I I'm concerned that we're not perhaps leaving a good historical record of our
Yeah.
times if in 40 years time Drive to Survive is what people decide to use as a template for discussing
Yes.
the 2022 season, it will be a very poor historical record. um,
Yes.
but the sport is what it is. It keeps changing for better and for worse.
Yeah.
um, and when you think they're getting their act together, there's a shambles like last weekend in Australia. And but it keeps going, and it's been through worse. From the first Grand Prix, um, you know, it's been ups and downs, and Formula have risen and fall, and there's been bumps along the road. But there will always be motor racing, and there will always be a new generation discovering it for the first time and being absolutely gobsmacked by it and adoring it. And they won't care what an old bloke like me thinks about it.
But the thing is, like, that's where the knowledge is. So we need to
Mm,
listen to those and take that knowledge, because for us, when we start watching, we don't have that knowledge that you have. So listening to you all and the stories that you guys say, so I've had so many guests come over and
mhm.
them sharing all their memories of the younger day, memories of the motorsport that they have and all that. So
Yes.
when I think back and when I listen to those stories, I'm like thinking, so that's why I asked that question, because for me, what I feel is like we lack that value, we lack that nourishment, we lack that excitement that you guys used to have, that love towards the sport, that dedication that you have, that devotion. It's another level that you have, but we don't have that sense. Like we lack that because we don't feel it from the sport. But
Well,
you used to feel that from the sport. So I think we lack in that part.
I think you're right, but I think it comes back to as well when I was young, when I was a kid, when I was 35, 40 years ago, when I was getting into Formula One properly,
Hmm.
you had to seek it out. Now, it's a double-edged sword because it was available on TV free of charge for a start. So you could discover it. You,
Yeah.
you could turn on one of your 3 or 4 TV channels that you'd got on a Sunday afternoon, and you could just happen upon a Grand Prix, and they might show an hour of it in the middle of the sports program, or you might stumble upon a highlight show free to air a Sunday evening, and you could find it. You could stumble upon it, and you could look at it, and you could look at this scene of Italy, or Japan, literally the other side of the world, and you could look at it with all these amazing colors and all this hubbub of excitement and sponsors and glamorous people and noise, and you could say, "What the hell is this?" And it would be amazing, and you would look at it, and the program would finish, and that would be it. When's the next one? Who are these people? What's that yellow car? What's that red car? Where was that place they were at? And there was no Google. There wasn't all the teams on Twitter telling you immediately exactly what had happened, and showing you photographs of their drivers, drinking juice in the garage.
Hmm.
You had to find it for yourself, and you had to go to the shop and find a magazine about it, which you probably couldn't afford. You sit and flick through it when nobody was looking, and then 2 weeks later, if you were lucky and you got your timing right and you noticed it in the TV guide, there it was again. And I think from having to absorb it in snippets like that, and the effect it had on you, and then you had time to think about it. Today, everything, and like, I love social media, and it's been so good to me, but it's a constant bombardment of new information, where then you watched a race, you watched a part of a race or highlights of a race, and you had 2 weeks to think about it, and that's all there was to it, and that was Formula One. And if you were lucky, you got to see a copy of Autosport, or you got a
Yeah.
hand-me-down copy of Grand Prix International or something to learn a little bit more. So it was hard earned, and I'm not saying that's better, because today it's fantastic. The accessibility to information, and just media everywhere bombarding, and you can find anything out. But I think the people who stuck with it back then, I think developed. I've developed a real love of it. I think because it was necessary to stick with it. Stick with it wasn't easy always, as
Yeah.
wonderful as it was. So I think there was a depth of feeling for the sport, and I think I was probably the same right through the 70s, 60s, 50s, and beyond.
Yeah.
But here we are today with all the new technology, which is wonderful, the new connectivity, and new generations are finding it in a different way and experiencing it in a different way. And it'll be interesting to see how that goes forward in the decades to come.
Yeah. So do you have any thoughts on the new F1 season, 2023 so far? Like what's missing from the season compared to the other amazing seasons in the past?
Oh,
Mm. I mean, there's something missing, definitely.
well, I was going to say first of all competition because Red Bull are that step ahead for whatever reason.
Yes, it is so boring. Oh my God.
well,
We
but
already know when the Red Bull comes in
yes,
front, it's like, okay, that's one, two, never mind. I'm like, oh my God.
but is it boring? Now I'm here to tell you we're talking about the good old days, and I'm you know these are the good old days right now. These are the good old days. Um, Red Bull are maybe winning relatively easy. And who knows, maybe they're sandbagging ever so slightly. Maybe they aren't just quite pushing yet because they're afraid of maybe a wee regulation tweak to rein them in. So maybe they're keeping a little bit in their pocket just yet. Having said that, when I was a kid and I was loving Nelson Piquet and the Brabham winning in 1983,
Mhm.
he was winning by a minute. You know, um, and I love the history,
Yeah.
but it's important not to always have your rose tinted glasses on when you look back at it. So,
Yeah.
you look back and you think maybe it was a swashbuckling wheel to wheel battle over 3 hours. Quite often it was spaced out and the winner was a mile away. So, 2023, we do. Red Bull are in the pound seat at the minute. No doubt about that. But it's not all doom and gloom. It has been fantastic to see what Aston Martin has done from the get go. Um, Aston have
That's a
been in.
crazy improvement. That's a crazy improvement when it comes to Aston Martin. But I mean,
Yeah.
I would love that competition. I would love to see some competition rather than a boring race. But you
Mm-hmm.
know what my brother says? Whenever I say, "Oh my God, this race is so boring," he always tells me, "So imagine Mercedes winning for strike. This is how the rest of the people were feeling. So you can't complain."
That's it, and that's motor racing, and it can't always be, yeah, it can't always be nose to tail for 170 miles. It can't be like that, and sometimes they play out the cliche of a chess match, and sometimes just somebody runs and hides, and it's over after 30 minutes effectively. But I think this season, I think performances within reason will wax and wane a bit. I think Mercedes will. I think I think we'll see great strides from Mercedes through the course of the year, and it will be very interesting how that plays out. And of course, we're as ever, it'll be a development race, and how the teams choose to spend the resources that are available to them through the course of the season, and we'll see what happens. Um, and as ever, there's stories up and down the grid. You know,
Yeah.
Red Bull, even if Red Bull runs and hides for the rest of the season, there'll be many fascinating stories right throughout the grid and right throughout the season, and there'll be lots for us to enjoy and pick over. I've no doubt about that. There, I'm sure we'll enjoy it.
So for me personally, I know the 2021 was a bizarre ending for the whole
Mm-hmm.
season, but
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to competition, I loved that season because that season, the competitiveness that they had, it was amazing. You never know when you watch the race who's going to win and who's going to come behind and what is happening. Like you can't predict at
Yes.
all. So you
Yep.
love that. So I
Oh
don't
yes,
know. I mean,
fantastic.
yeah, I the result was bizarre, but still, that season was the
The
best season out of all these few years.
bizarre is one word to use for the conclusion to 2021. There are lots of words that you could use about the conclusion of 2021. Um, uh, Lots of words that you could use that wouldn't be appropriate for this podcast, perhaps. But uh, certainly the season was outstanding that year, and certainly the level of competition was, and the level of pressure that rose and rose through the season. Um, Perhaps the pressure was always going to blow somehow at the end of it, but nobody quite expected a rule bending conclusion to it. None of us saw that coming, but
Oh,
yeah,
this was
but
never. Yes, this was like not even Ben Hanso that was going.
no, but you get seasons like that, and you get seasons that are not like that
Yeah.
in terms of competitiveness, and you hold on to the memory. You always find the stories that you enjoy through the year. You always learn more, and you always look forward. And yeah, motor racing continues, and there's always new faces and new stories, and I reckon as long as you don't forget the old ones, it's all good.
Okay, so ask you the last question. I
Uh-huh.
have this question to ask you. So we ask this question from every single guest who comes over to the
Okay.
pod. And even Mario Andretti had to answer this.
Oh, oh, oh,
Imagine
now I'm
that.
worried.
Me
Now
asking
I'm
Mario
worried.
Andretti that question.
Oh, okay,
So,
now I'm worried.
are you ready for this?
I don't think so, but go ahead.
Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
Ah, dear. Oh, dear. Your listeners are going to hate
Imagine
it.
me asking an Italian pineapple
Yeah,
on pizza.
your listeners are going to hate me, but I like pineapple on pizza.
Yes, me too.
Oh dear. What did Mario say? Was Mario
Oh, he
horrified? Was
laughed at it. So he laughed at it and then he said, no, never.
oh, it's an effrontery to his Italian tradition. I'm surprised he didn't cut the interview short.
But you know what? So
Mhm.
since like as I said, we've been asking this question from every single guest.
Yeah.
So Amanda Busick, when she came over, she said she loved pineapple on pizza, and then she asked us whether we have tried pineapple on a hot dog.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
Now,
in US they get pineapples on hot dog.
now, dare I say it? That sounds like something you might try after you've had too many beers.
Uh-huh. And then the I mean, the controversial answer that we got was from Ben
Hmm.
Hunt. When he came
Okay.
over, he said whether we have tried banana on pizza. And then he
Oh
said,
no.
I know that it feels very like yucky when we hear it, but apparently it tasted good.
No, 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 no.
I'm
That's
not
that's
gonna
a
try that.
that's
I
that's
am
a
never
step.
gonna try
That's a step too far. That's
yeah, I'm not going to try that. Hell no. But so that's Team Pineapple, one more, and then
Yep.
F1 Black
Tick.
and Denzel is zero again.
Good stuff.
So, what content can our listeners look forward to for the imminent future on Racing Daydreams? And how can listeners connect with you with their favorite historical motor racing moments or tales?
All right, okay. There will be more stories, most definitely, on racingdaydreams.com.
Mhm.
Um, as ever, inspiration will strike. As I say, I'm just back from a trip to Nice in the south of France, where I've been looking at the races around Nice Week in 1903, and about the Mercedes team down there during that week's racing 120 years ago. So there will no doubt be stories from that. Um, Stories telling history and perhaps a few wee tales from the road and snooping about and things that I found when I was looking for the old circuit. I also plan to write something more. I've already written a few pieces about the Ards TT sports car race, but off the back of the TV documentary, the BBC TV documentary I was involved with about the Ards TT, I intend to write some more about that as well. Um, and I've a few road trips for during the year, so I will write about those as well and historical connections. And in the summertime, it is the 120th anniversary of the Gordon Bennett Cup race in Ireland, the famous international car race. And so I will probably be down in Southern Ireland exploring around that time, around that anniversary, at the start of July, and no doubt there'll be pieces about that as well. So there'll be, and other things as well that come to mind. Quirky things, pieces of history, cool photographs that I've found. Oh, cool film that I found as well. I bought some footage of a sports car race a few weeks back, so we're investigating as to what exactly that is. So we might be doing something with that as well. So, yeah, so lots of things to come. Best way to keep in touch, best way to see what's happening would probably be to follow me on Twitter. On Twitter, I'm at CJ Grand Prix. So you can connect with me there and tell me if you loved or hated this podcast for a start. And if you've chat away, talk about motor racing, chew the fat, talk about history, ask me stuff. Tell me you like the website, tell me you hate the website, tell me what you want to see on the website. Yep, that's all good. Yeah,
And we
anytime.
hope to have you back again on an episode and definitely on a YouTube live. Yes, Denzel will definitely love you.
Anytime, no problem. It's been great fun. Anytime at all, give me a shout.
I'm pretty sure that both the boys will be loved to have you back again because more than that, they have the whole knowledge about the whole history of Grand Prix and they will enjoy every bit of things that they're going to talk with you. So I hope that you will come back with us, join back with us for a YouTube live show and another episode with the guys so that you guys can have a, guys to guy can have a
Sounds good.
whole chat about the whole Grand Prix. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Well, thanks for everybody who listened.
So that's it for our episode on George stripping dipping. I hope you guys have a very great, perfect day if you are listening to this during the daytime or at the gym session. And if it's night, then have a good night and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.